Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got two new faces. Justin and Mary Beth are here, and I am very excited to get into the conversation with them. Seb, unfortunately, is unable to join us as his Wi Fi is not great in the jungle. Surprise, surprise, right? Now, while I'm surprised, y'all shouldn't be. You should like the show. You should subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all those good things so you get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, hit us up in the comment section right here. Kind of like this one, Chris K. Morning, folks. In before winter storm and salty. I like this. We got a little race going on here to see who can get in their first morning comment before everybody else. And then Diamond Arrow Group, good to see you. Looking forward to hearing from all you today. Very good. Winter Storm, there he is. Good morning, team. Good to see you. He's a little behind, but let's get into some intros, and then we'll get into the conversation. So, Mary Beth, let's start with you.
Sure.
Who are you, where you come from, all that stuff. 15 to 20 seconds. Give her.
Yeah. So from Chicago originally, one of 7 kids. Currently, I am a New Mexico resident, although I am sitting in Todos Santos, Mexico, where we had a hurricane over the weekend, but we're fine. Professionally, I am currently a forensic and clinical psychologist. I'm also a former United States Secret Service agent. I'm sort of the master of reinvention. So if I kind of went through my whole bio, it would take the whole show. But what's kind of launched me into things like this, knowing Kelly at the Diamond Arrow Group, is having published a book about 4 years ago. I should have asked Justin before we started, but my book is called The Protector, and then it's got a long subtitle. But it's about my years as a protection agent, and not just about the Secret Service, because that was a short-lived career. You have to read the book as to why, and then that just launched me into international executive protection. So then each chapter kind of just talks about a mission that I accepted and where it took me and why, and some of the fun lessons out of that.
Right on. I'm looking forward to reading it. But Justin, you want to give us a quick little rundown who you are, where you come from?
Sure. Justin Keating here, the Real Irish Lad on Instagram. I'm an author, newly published author, self-published. My book is called The Protector Series. It's a 3-book series. First one that just launched last month is on solo executive protection for ultra high net worth individuals. The second one will be the everyday protector. So anybody in general that wants to learn how to, protect their families, protect their homes, whatever. And then the third one will be mostly focused on cyber. Other than that, coach kids Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 5 days a week and raising 2 boys.
Bam. Loving life, I bet. Every second of it. So, Shaun, do you want to we got 2 new faces here. Do you want to give a quick intro on yourself?
I think I'm good.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's carry on then. I like it. So, quick couple more comments right off the bat. April M, good morning. Cody, good afternoon, everyone. Excited for today's talk. And again, Kelly really likes your book, so there you go. Good to go.
Thanks, Cal.
Now, we're going to get into creating culture. This is the general topic for the week, but let's get it started off with a quick definition. So, culture: the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. The set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization, or the set of values, conventions, or social practices associated with a particular field, activity, or societal characteristic, which I think is a really interesting take on it. But when I say, what is culture to you, what are your guys' first thoughts? Justin, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go around the table. Justin, what do you think?
It can mean multitude of things. I think a lot of it comes from your heritage, how you're raised, the environments that you're raised in, because we all know that each section of the country has their own little culture. I think a lot of it has to based off your experience and what you've learned in life and places you've visited. I think we suck in multiple forms of culture and kind of adapt to our own, other than our baseline heritage. So.
Interesting. Mary Beth, what do you think about yourself?
I don't know. Can you hear? Oh, you can hear me. Yeah. It's interesting because right when you said that, I thought, there was a time on my resume that I would put that I'm fluent in both the Spanish language and culture. And I was thinking, like, why did I put that? And it mattered to me because I just didn't learn Spanish as the language, say, by a textbook. I learned it because I lived in Spain for almost 4 years. And I really did absorb like their ways of living. And that was like so many different parts of the country. Because just like Justin was saying, in our country, in every country, I think all different areas have different customs, different language, different styles of viewing the world. Spain, you know, like here, like the North wants to be independent from the rest of the country, and they're fighters, they're Basques, you know, they're whatever. And then the South is like busy dancing in the street and drinking and eating great food. So it's like, you know, this whole mix of traditions, I guess I would say, traditions, language, fiestas, food, everything, really, how we live day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
How can you create culture if you don't understand culture? It doesn't come before the other one. No one can create culture until they've observed culture. So as has just been stated, you can't understand Spain if you're landing in the Barcelona airport, staying there for 2 hours and moving on to the next country. That isn't understanding culture. That is landing in an airport. And by the way, you could spend the rest of your life in that airport and not learn a freaking thing unless you're paying attention to your surroundings and trying to learn. That's the thing of it. You've got to learn something in order to create something else. And so I just finished booking the flights. My wife and I are going down to Australia for a week so I can coach at a 24-hour solo world championship. 2 national athletes. And then after a week, we're flying to Malaysia for a month. And then after Malaysia, we're flying to Japan for 2 weeks. And so I don't know what the culture is in Malaysia, but I've been to well over 40 countries to date. And so I understand global culture to some degree. But then we break it down to the specifics of the national culture. And then, as was just stated, we break it down to the North-South culture. And then we break it down to the city culture. Then it's the neighborhood culture. Then it's down to the cafe culture. Then it's down to the culture between me and the person who's behind the counter in the cafe, establishing what their culture is. You can't create culture until you've observed culture. You can't create novel solutions culturally until you've understood enough about the traditional or established culture. And so that's where I'd like to start off, for myself anyway, see where the conversation goes, is you should never try to create culture until you've seen enough culture to understand how you can create.
That's an interesting start. Mary Beth, you got some thoughts on that?
Well, so I'm wondering what you mean. Like, are you saying that there's this style or this movement where people are looking to create? I mean, yes, we're always looking to create culture. Like let's say you start a company or you started this podcast. What's the culture of the podcast, of the company? So yeah, like what, and I think it was really interesting. So thank you, Shaun, that you started with, Chance, that you started with a definition of what culture is, because, and it was pretty detailed. I kind of think I would have liked to have heard it a couple times to really absorb what you define. But it's true, if you haven't lived in different cultures and really absorbed the meaning, or at least the meaning to you, or and experienced different cultures, and understood that you've experienced different cultures, right? Because I agree, it goes down to like, what was my family's culture growing up? And then within my family, we had a neighborhood. You know, I was brought up Catholic. I'm one of 7 kids. And then there was that sort of church culture. And then it went on to like, oh, the whole community of the church culture. And it goes on and on. So yeah, but you have to understand that those were all cultures to be able to then develop. You guys have to establish, how do we want the collective, you know, how do we want their culture to be seen and understood, and on and on. So I think that's a pretty cool way of looking at it. You have to experience culture to create culture. Just sort of echoing what Shaun said.
I like it. Justin, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's where we run into a lot of our social divide across the world. So many people have not experienced culture or other cultures outside of their own little bubbles. And want to second everything that everyone said. You know, you can't create culture. You have to experience it and then adapt it to how it fits in your life and how everything molds together. So.
Yeah.
Now I'm have a quick question on this in terms of thought, because I'm agreeing with everybody too. Like, you have to experience other things, and there's the stereotypical American tourist is the picture that pops into my head, right? They're walking around in the Hawaiian shirt and somewhere in Spain taking pictures, whatever. But they're not actually interacting with the culture. They're putting their cultural bias, I guess, onto the experiences that they're having versus absorbing them. And to your point, Justin, if you're not, if you haven't been anywhere else, that just seems normal. So to the people that haven't been anywhere, to people that, maybe they've spent most of their life in the one town that they've grew up in, how do they develop that culture? Like, if they don't have the opportunity, let's say, to go to Spain, how would they better understand that culture? Mary Beth, what do you think?
Yeah, I would go to movies. I think a big discovery, possibly one of the positive things that happened from COVID is that I remember a friend said to me during COVID, if you're bored, like, that's your problem. There is so much on YouTube. Like, you can do these, or not even just YouTube, but you could do these like tours through the different museums in Spain, tours through the Louvre, like they were doing all this amazing cultural stuff that you could expand. Like, yeah, you might not have the money or the frequent flyer miles to cash in, but you can still make an effort through the different things that, with social media and now with our digital lives, that you can sort of like be there without being there,
That's a great point. Justin, thought?
That's the beauty of the internet. We've been able to truly experience, other people, other cultures, other lifestyles, other whatever you want to label it. And we've been able to really, truly kind of understand people in a little bit better way that, if you, like you said, if you can't afford to go to this place, you can't go to here, can't go to there, the internet is a plethora of information and culture itself. So
that's a good point. Shaun, any thoughts?
So many. I'll try to restrict them. I'll say this, that, the mention of the Louvre as the example, or maybe Barcelona. I've stood in both places. We were in the Louvre last summer and spent the day in it. And, we were in several countries last summer throughout Europe. There's a wild difference between watching a 10-minute walkthrough video of the Louvre and standing in the Louvre. And now this is really important. I don't want to gloss over this as just a little glib statement and, yeah, we all nod and agree and it's all good. It's a wild difference. And the difference is this. Someone can watch a video at home in whereversville that they've never left and now believe that they understand the Louvre. No, you don't. Not unless you've stood in it. Not unless you've stood in the crowds, you've heard the things, you've smelled the things, you've seen the things, you've tasted the things, you've touched the things. Unless you've been in it, really connected with it in the now, existed in it in the now, you don't understand it. You think you understand it. What you do understand is a 10-minute video. That's it, that's all. You've learned some things. You've learned data, details, knowledge. There's a wild difference between knowledge and experience. And I know that sometimes over here on The Collective, we talk about how do you get experience? Through knowledge over time, through executing against something, actions, making mistakes, learning. You build your wisdom through knowledge. You can get knowledge from the internet, but it's a thin veneer of the actual experience of standing in the Louvre. Where things go awry in society, I feel, on this particular point, is someone at home will watch a 10-minute video, check the box on, now I've been to the Louvre, now I understand the Louvre, now I am the Louvre. And they will confer that throughout their life through watching 2-minute TikTok videos, 5-minute YouTube videos, 8-minute Instagram videos, compile them all together through other people's videos and collate it into their worldview of a quote unquote experienced understanding of the world and then start living their life based on other people's videos that they'll sometimes even fast forward through until they get to the part that they like, cherry pick that point out, put it into their worldview. Now they've got their construct and off they go. And it is a distorted view of the world. You can't understand the Louvre unless you've stood in the Louvre. And so you can't understand the world around you unless you've gone out and traveled in the world around you. It's super duper important. And I know that this comes down to budgeting. It's super important that you expand your footprint beyond your household. The further you can go, the better you're going to be. If you can go to one end of your country and the other end of your country, you're going to learn more than just watching a video about your country. You want to know more about the world? You got to jump on a plane and leave your continent and understand what hunger looks like, what heat looks like, what cold looks like, what happy and sad looks like, outside of your own little worldview constructed through YouTube. And I know I'm drawing a gross comparison between the norm versus this sort of thing that I'm proposing right now. I know that the norm out there isn't as extreme as I'm painting it, but as individuals, it is our responsibility that if we want to understand our world, we've got to travel in it.
But don't you think also, for example, like I was just thinking as you were talking about, like you have to be there and then to experience it and understand the culture. I think you can go to Barcelona for a week and still not understand the culture. And what I mean by that is, okay, for example, I'm a trained psychologist, and a big part of our training is, don't assume because you've been somewhere that you understand the culture. So let's say I spent 9 months in Haiti, which is true. I was on a protective mission there. And one place I was working in, doing an internship, asked me if I felt comfortable with a Haitian client. And I said, well, I lived there for 9 months, but I don't want to presume that I understand their experience of culture. So, it's also the same of, I grew up in Chicago and some of my friends from college moved to Chicago after college. It's not the same thing as growing up in Chicago. The culture, I experienced it from like day one of my birth. And it's so different from like, sort of like, picking up at 20 years old or 22 years old. So I think, in answer to what you're saying, Shaun, I don't disagree that you have to live it, but everybody's like that. I think culture has many layers. So like you and I could spend the exact same amount of time in a country or in the Louvre and still have very differing views on what the culture of that city, museum, or place is.
Yeah, 100%. That was the point I was going to make too, Shaun. You got it.
I agree. Now, we're not going to disagree on this because what you've done is you've reinforced my point for me, about me, not about everyone else. And so the example is this, that if I, and being to Barcelona, that's where we did our honeymoon, is Spain, over 20 years ago. So if I stand in Barcelona for 3 minutes, I know enough about Barcelona more so than any other tourist on the sidewalk at that point. And here's why. Because I've spent my entire life dialing into cultures, being situationally aware, observing what I observe in the real time, not missing a beat, and pushing it all into my big bad brain for my entire life. I've said it before, I can jump out of the back of a CC-130 in my underwear and a dagger in my teeth, and I'll own that country by the end of the day. Now, that's a massive exaggeration to make the point. I am extremely comfortable anywhere in the world. Give me 10 seconds and I understand the country. Because I've been in enough countries with enough 10-second timelines. You better get a grip on this in 10 seconds, Shaun. I've done that so many times that it stacks on itself throughout my life so that I can literally jump out of a plane, land, and own where I land. I couldn't have done that when I was 20 because I didn't have enough chops. I didn't have enough experience. I'd never been to Barcelona. But all of the places that I've been, all of the things that I've done, all of that stuff, those experiences, all of those absorbing of cultures, which is literally what I do in my spare time. If I have spare time, it's trying to understand other cultures. The reason that we chose Malaysia is because it is considered to be the best representation of a melting pot within Southeast Asia. We've been to other countries in Southeast Asia, but Malaysia has the Malay, the Chinese, the Indian, and et cetera, et cetera. It is considered universally as the melting pot of Asia. Not just the food, not just the people, the culture. It's why we targeted Malaysia, because we love to understand other cultures, unique people. I like to learn about the world around me to stack it into my big brain so that I can, next time I travel, more rapidly, effectively, and efficiently feel the culture that I just stepped into and understand it at a deeper level than when I was 15 or when I was 35. Now at 60, when I land in a place, I know that country better than anyone stepping off that plane with me, just because I've been in the game so long. And it's the game that you've played in life. If you've been playing it in front of your Nintendo in the middle of, I don't know, the cornfields of whereversville, if you've never left your town, but you've only left your house through a video game, you don't understand culture other than the gaming culture, which is critical to this conversation. There are so many cultures out there. Before I jumped into this live chat or jumped into my own live chat over on IG, I'd pushed up a little story and it had just come into my feed. And it was a guy, an older man, with a young fella. He was 14 years old. And this kid was a gamer and they were communicating back and forth. They didn't know each other. The 14-year-old kid had just come out of a conversation where some guy just told him to kill himself. And the other gamer jumped in and said, "Hey, bro, it's all good. You know, you're a cool kid. Don't worry about any of that stuff." He interacted with him, made a connection. It was super cool how the adult played out that 60-second clip. And that grown man with that 14-year-old boy did a good thing in that moment, as far as I'm concerned, within the gaming culture. But I don't understand the gaming culture. Mm-hmm. So as I observed it, I thought, good on you. So I pushed it into my stories. But you know what I don't know? Is the gaming culture deep enough that I could look at that and think, well, it looks like good on you, but maybe he's I'm going to say it, maybe he's a pedophile. I absolutely don't think he is. But if I would have misconstrued that interaction and pushed it up to my stories, and then a day later, like tomorrow, I find out that that guy is a pedophile, I'll be mortified. So I've pushed something out there when I'm proclaiming that I'm worldly. I'm proclaiming that I'm experienced. I'm proclaiming that I understand a lot of cultures. But there's a lot of cultures that I don't understand, like the freaking gaming culture. And so I don't have all of it figured out. I've got some things figured out. And so there's so many ways to slice up the cultural conversation that I just want to ensure, or I just want to make sure that anyone who's listened to anything that I've said up to this point doesn't think that I'm proclaiming I know a lot of stuff. I know some stuff, and I know it works for me culturally. And I do know that I need to learn more in a whole bunch of areas on culture.
This opens up so many questions for me. I have so much stuff to hit. But
dude, pull that clip up. I threw it in my stories if you can.
Raj, I will. Justin, you got any thoughts on that while I'm...
Yeah, this whole conversation reminds me of a quote from some of my favorite movie series, the Indiana Jones series. And Harrison Ford has a quote in one of the, I think it's the fourth movie. It's the scene where he slides underneath the tables on the motorcycle, and he's talking to some kid who asked him a question about some archaeological, philosophy or something of that nature. And he goes, "If you want to understand archaeology, you got to get out of the library." And it's so true. You have to get out of your bubble. You have to get out. And like Shaun said, we can experience so many different cultures across this world. And I'm sure the four of us have in our own collective, but we still don't understand a lot of different cultures. Like Shaun, like you're hitting on the gaming culture. I don't understand any of that. And I never probably will. The last gaming system I played was a original Nintendo, so I'm dating myself here, but And it also reminds me of a quote that I use quite a bit when protecting high net worth people. I tell my protectors, and I tell people I've worked with, they have their own culture. They have their own lifestyle. You get to live the billionaire lifestyle with your few hundreds, but you'll never truly understand what it's like to be them until you become one of them. So.
Absolutely. Okay, so I got that video. I'm going to see if I can pull it up and get everybody to watch it right now. Here we go.
Hello.
The last person I talked to immediately told me to kill myself and then left.
Don't do that. You look like a cool guy. I love the shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
What's your favorite Legend of Zelda game?
Minish Cap.
Bam. So that's just the story. Yeah, let me get the whole. Sorry, my bad. My bad. I got to open.
You
up
got
the
all
actual
lost
reel.
in the story.
I did. There we go. Let's get this up here and get this going.
The last person I talked to immediately told me to kill myself and then left.
Don't do that. You look like a cool guy. I love the shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
What's your favorite Legend of Zelda game?
Minish Cap.
Hey, what console is that on?
Game Boy Advance.
Ooh, okay, you're a veteran.
Mm.
How old are you?
14.
And is that like a Pokemon hat?
Yeah.
Bro, you're dripped out, bro. Guess what my name is?
I cannot guess that.
Look, I'll give you a hint. What you're wearing.
Ash?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
That's like my full name's Ashraf, but people call me Ash.
nice.
Yeah, bro. What's your name?
Jesse.
Jesse. Don't let the haters get to you, okay?
Thank you.
When that guy told you to kill yourself, how did you feel?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of found it funny just because of how instant it was.
Yeah. I hope you have the best life.
Same here.
Peace, bro.
Peace. Hello.
Bam. Bam. I like
And
it. That's
I love that. I don't know. I don't know if that's cool or not in the gaming community or whatever. I don't know if that guy's. I clicked on him after the fact to make sure that he had a big following, and I sniffed around some of his content. He seems like a pretty positive guy. I don't push stuff up without thought, so I did take a look at him. But I could be off base. He could turn into a total jerk. I don't know. But I love that interaction, man. I love that he cared for that young man, and I love that. Obviously two very different people, but throughout the cultural norm of gaming, the adult right away synchronized to the culture of that kid and right away got communicating with him on as peers almost. And so what is fascinating to me about cultures is you can step into any culture. And nowadays, it isn't age-related so much as it used to be pre-internet. So if you stepped into any situation, typically you deferred to someone who was older and wiser within the cultural norms. But nowadays, with a technological world, our cultures are actually flippity-flopped. Like at 60, I don't understand the gaming culture, but my boys at 18 and 19 years old, they understand the gaming culture. So cultures, the norms, and the setters of norms are a little bit different as the world unfolds nowadays.
absolutely. Mary Beth, you got any thoughts?
Well, I actually wanted to ask Shaun a question, kind of going back to what he was saying about the trip that he's going to be taking this summer, or in the past, because he seems to have traveled a lot with his family, and because you have different exposure, as the four of us do, because we all have traveled the world quite a bit. So then you go on a trip with, like, say, your spouse, your kids. Do you then, at the end of the day, have a discussion about culture and like how the four of you or five of you, however many there are, have viewed the culture that you experienced that day? Like, because it would be 4 or 5. I'm sorry, I'm just making an assumption that you have like the perfect 4-person family, right?
We do.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So then you have a discussion about it, because everybody, age wise, sex wise, meaning male, female, experience wise, there's going to be all these different perspectives of what you just experienced in that one day, I guess, I would think.
Well, it's a good question. Actually, a very insightful question. I've never been asked it before, so I've never considered it before. So I'll lay the groundwork in the way of setting sort of the construct. So when our boys were about 2 and 3 years old, we traveled to Vietnam for 6 weeks as a family. Started in the south, went to the north. And that's kind of what we've done ever since. We've traveled with our boys around the world, and they've learned how to learn about the world around them. One of our jobs as parents, I think, is to not just put our kids through an education system and a sports team. It's to teach them about the world. And the only way to teach a person about a world is through books, movies, relaying stories, or frickin' putting your running shoes on and going out and walking it. I mean, get out in the world. That's what we did with our boys. They've traveled a lot. Our boys have seen more countries than some people have seen cities. And that's important to your question now, which is, would we talk about it every evening? No, we talk about it throughout the day. And sometimes we wouldn't talk about it at all because nothing needed to be said, because referring back to what I'd stated earlier in the podcast, once you start stacking up experiences, eventually you've got enough body of work in you that it's not kindergarten anymore. It's not like elementary school anymore. It's now you understand the world and you can process it based on all of the body of work that you've got in you. That's what we did with our boys. From an early age, they learned how to understand the world. When we were in Europe last summer, one of the things that I did with them when we were in Paris, we jumped on a train, went up to Cannes and to the D-Day beach area. I wanted to stand on that sand with my 2 sons and not teach them anything, not talk about anything. We went to the big museum. I let them walk around on their own volition. We'd hook up, we'd separate, we'd hook up, we'd separate. They did their own journey within the museum, which is immense and fascinating and impactful. But when we were standing outside of the museum, standing on that dirt, looking around, I didn't brief them or take the time to try to inject my thoughts into their brains. We just stood and observed and felt. And I let them chew on their own thoughts on what it meant to them. Sometime afterwards, days afterwards, I asked each boy what they thought of that moment. But that's between me and them, not me and the world. But I gave them the space to feel what they needed to feel. And that moment took many countries and much effort to get to the point where I could just stand next to them and let them feel what they feel and process it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. Justin, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just wanted to second that on teaching your kids kind of the experiences and talking to them about your experiences that you've been through and stuff. My stepson does jiu-jitsu with me at my gym. He runs. So we have our own little culture within jiu-jitsu, but then we've got everybody that comes there has their own little culture. And so it's cool to watch him learn about the different people and their different experiences of people who are training there. And I always ask him, hey, how did you like rolling with this person? How did you like rolling with that person? And he's like, oh, well, he speaks funny. And I go, well, buddy, that's how things are going to happen. You know, people are going to speak funny to you. You know, people have accents, this and that. And so we're slowly like trying to engage with him about that. And so to show him the different worldviews that we have, his mom and I have, you know, culminated or accumulated up to this point. But I think it's extremely important that you immerse your kids in that, not just verbally, not just educationally, but physically, like Shaun was saying. If you can, take your kids on trips. I mean, heck, even if it's to another state, take your kids with you so they can see how other people live. And just kind of second everything that you guys are saying. So
absolutely. My wife and I took my boys. I got 2 boys as well. They're a little bit younger, 10 and 6. And we went to, this is the first time they've come down to help me with the branding. So, you know, I grew up in the country and my family owns a ranch and we have cattle and stuff like that. Up until this point, there has been some familial issues with me and me and some of my siblings, and I didn't want my boys to be involved in it. So it kind of separated them from the ranch, and I realized that they had had absolutely no experience in it whatsoever. They saw me riding horses, I got a saddle in the back, like that kind of stuff, but they had never actually experienced it. They'd seen it, but never actually been part of it. And so we went down there, and we were running around at the ranch, and my youngest started playing with poo. Like, there's there's cattle dung everywhere, right? Just picked up a stick, started playing with it, started filling in gopher holes, started like exploring the world. And my wife kind of came over. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "No, this is normal. This is country life. You got nothing else to do? Go play with some poo, right?" But to your point, Justin, as you said, is that that initial concept of take them outside, even outside your neighborhood, outside your city, outside your province, your state, whatever, take them out there. You have the experience, and pass it on to them. Not just give them the experience, but let them experience it on their own. And so I had a question about this in terms of, because you guys have all come from a protection background too. Yeah, especially, and I mean all of you guys, but the idea of protecting a client in a new environment. So you have to deal with somebody else who doesn't have the experience in this new culture, and you have to be able to absorb the culture outside of you at the same time, as well as protect the person that is doing the same thing. And so I liken it to taking kids around, at least in my perception of it. I've never done it, but how do you develop your understanding of the culture in the moment while you're dealing with it, but also translate that to your protectorate, the person that you're trying to manage, at the same time? It seems very challenging. So what do you guys think? Mary Beth, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah. So you're saying that both the protectee and I are new to this culture, right? It's not me, for example, like I told you, I spent 9 months working in Haiti, but the protectee was Haitian, right? So you're saying both of us. So, I think for me, that's true of almost any situation, whether I'm in a different city, a different country, a different drugstore, right? I literally take the time, and I'm like, my brain is just like processing, like, what the F is happening right now? Why is that person acting that way? Why is this not seem normal to me? And I'm possibly, because this is one of my favorite go-to tools, at taking a couple deep breaths to kind of, not react, not be reactive, but rather do my best to absorb and say, I might not understand the situation perfectly, but clearly we're in somebody else's territory, as what's his name used to say, come on, you guys, help me out. Do you guys know I'm talking? Steve Irwin.
Yes.
Yeah, we're in their territory, or whatever he used to say. And to just say, okay, I might not have the best response right now, but I'm going to do my best to at least understand that this isn't something I fully get. So if I offend somebody, I'll apologize. Or if my protectee offends, we'll apologize. But sometimes you just F up because you just have no clue what's going on. And other times, if you just take a more neutral, like, hey, like, help me. I don't know what's happening here. What am I missing? Right? You kind of take that perspective of help me out, and if it's a situation where you've got to act really fast, you might screw up, but it's about protecting your protectee, depending on where you are and if you're in a dangerous situation or just like an everyday, like ordering food situation. I'm not even sure I answered your question, but I had so many things going through my brain and so many countries that I was in with different protectees. And I don't remember ever having like a terrible outcome, but there might've been. I would just have to have a little bit of time to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take it from a personal experience. I had a client one time. We were in the Balkans, and this client didn't understand that kind of culture there. They didn't understand how this person's a very, how do I put it? It stands out by looks. Okay, the protecting stands out by looks, and they didn't understand why the people were staring at them. And so I said, well, we're new to their area. We're foreigners. We're outside. We don't look like them. I mean, I'm blonde hair, blue eyes with a beard and tattoos, like they're all dark hair, dark eyes, and so I was like, you have to understand where they're coming from, where we're coming from. And I kind of gave that protectee a little bit better understanding of that particular culture that we were in. And then just kind of let them figure out how to adapt to that, but also keeping a mindful eye if someone's staring too hard or whatever, the typical security mindset. But I think you have to kind of, like with our kids, you kind of let them learn it on their own but still staying vigilant at the same time. I hope that answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
If we're going to stick to the specifics of close protection or looking after someone in a foreign country, or maybe just in a foreign state, a different city, I think it's like everything. It's what I was trying to describe earlier in the podcast, that you got to start from ground zero. You've got to start from like the elementary building blocks of learning who you are in the moment, learning you within a culture. Don't ever think that you're going to become a bodyguard or a VIP protectionist or whatever the sexy name is this year to look after someone. Don't think that you're going to do that if you can't freaking look after yourself. I mean, if you don't get up in the morning and make your bed, don't put your name in the yellow pages and call yourself a protector. I mean, you've got to get a grip on yourself first. You got to get a grip on your understanding of cultures first. If you've never left Idaho and you're going to take on a contract to look after someone in Africa, freaking tear that contract up, shake your silly head, and get your nose in the books called learning more about the world than watching Netflix. You can't understand the Louvre through a YouTube video. You can't understand protection through a dusty book. You've got to travel the world. You've got to do things. You've got to fail at things. You've got to get some minor successes. Just you and you alone before you ever consider looking after another human being in protection. That's it. That's all. That's all I can say on that, other than exclamation marks lined up after that. So how do you get there? How do you become someone who can look after someone if you can't look after yourself? I don't know. So figure yourself out first. Figure yourself out, and then figure yourself out in relationship to your kids. Start looking after your kids before you want to look after someone in Africa. And so through that arrangement, this is important. And this is going back to what Justin said with BJJ. I'll try to tie it together. When our boys were younger, I looked at them as men and what they needed to be in the future. And so they hit the BJJ mats with me when they were about 11 years old. And my oldest, who's 19 now in second year engineering and university, he's rolled with me for about 8 years nearly. And he's my main rolling partner. He's my favorite rolling partner. Do you know where he started? He started in kids class. And as soon as kids class was done, he immediately went into adult class with me. And at 12 years old, he was rolling with men who had nearly 200 pounds on him at times. And sometimes he'd be a bit frustrated. And I'd look at him and say, don't worry, kid, it'll all work out. You just got to see the long game. You'll understand. You'll understand. And now he does. And now he's set up for life in that area. Those sort of challenges that would cripple another kid working with adults as an adult who's never played with adults before. What a rotten start for a kid. They leave high school and then the next day they're standing around adults and they've never interacted with adults before. That sucks as a start line. And so you got to get in front of this stuff as the long game get in front of it. So when you're looking at your kids, you've got to see them as men. And that man needs certain things. And that those certain things don't show up on day one of now you're a man at 19. You got to get that stuff way ahead of the game. Just like culture. You can't understand culture when you step out of high school and now you're day one as an adult and somehow you're magically conferred the properties of you're a cultural phenom. It doesn't work that way. The only way to get something is to earn something. You can't learn it through a book. You can't learn it through a video. You got to go out, get sweaty. You got to skin your knee. You got to bleed a little bit. You got to curse a little bit. You got to have someone curse at you a little bit from across the street in a language that you don't understand. That's called interacting with the big world to understand big cultures.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Fantastic. Shaun's got just dropping bombs left, right, and center here. I love this.
Yeah, those are hard to follow up.
Right?
Can we bust Shaun on the yellow page referral though? Come on.
Yeah.
The sad
That's my
part is we can all remember the yellow pages. It just doesn't. I actually feel bad because I really wish I used to have. My brother used to beat the crap out of me with them, so like I kind of want to toughen up my boys maybe a little bit. Just
Yeah,
they don't get them anymore. Now I have a couple comments here I just want to touch on before we dive farther into this. But April jumped in here and said, and this goes to Shaun's point, is people are the best repositories of information on culture and absorbing it, but more so understanding it and its nuances, which are particular to each culture. And I wanted to touch on this in the fact that Shaun introduced his sons to adult culture before they were an adult. In the same way, like when you're in high school, that is its own culture, right? It has its own little cliques and it has its own little things. And the moment you step out of that and now you're into the working culture, the everyday life, you have to build upon your knowledge of culture basically from scratch, which is challenging. It's not an easy thing to do. So that's, I think, why a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds that just come out of high school have so many difficulties, is that they haven't been exposed to it in any way. So going back to the original topic of creating culture, and I think this is something that we all have to do within ourselves, is the ability to create a personal culture based upon what our experiences are. How did you guys develop through those periods of culture shock? Through, anybody goes in the military, that's going to be a culture shock, right? Anybody that goes into a service profession, that's going to be a culture. You go into a different training environment, you go different people, all kinds of things. So how did you guys go through it? How did your culture, your own culture, build in your own head as you progressed through your experiences? Justin, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll equate that to jiu-jitsu. Coming out of the Marine Corps, I thought I was Mr., I could beat up anybody. I've been in combat. I've done this. I've done that. I'm tough. And then I go to my first BJJ school and some little 125-pound Brazilian just completely wrecks me. And it completely pushed my whole idea of combat or unarmed combat and jiu-jitsu to a whole new level. And I'm like, whoa, you only experience so much until you experience the other side of it. Like Shaun was saying about his kids go from kids BJJ to adults BJJ, two different aspects, two different worlds because of weight classes, because of skill level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Personally, I try to take every single one of those experiences that I've dealt with and adapt that into my everyday life. Whether it's I'm going to the post office, I understand, say someone's getting unruly in the post office. Am I going to jump in on this because I know how to fight, or am I just going to kind of back off and let them deal with themselves because they're probably having a bad day? Probably the second. But you have to understand who those people are, and you have to understand yourself in that particular situation too. So if I go into like a jiu-jitsu match with somebody, another purple belt that their skill level is, I don't know if they're a first time purple belt or they've been a purple belt for 5 or 6 years. But I have to go in with the understanding that, okay, they're bringing everything from their experience into this match, and now they're going to experience what I've experienced, and those two things are going to collide. It's the same thing in life. I think we all butt heads on social aspects because we don't understand each other's cultures. And then, like Shaun said, you don't understand your own. So you have to understand yourself first before you can understand the others. And that's, I'll say it again, that's why I love jujitsu so much, because you bring so many cultures all into one, into a brand new culture itself. Like I make a joke to my kids at class. I said, you guys, you know, at any given day, there could be a homeless dude out here rolling on these mats and a billionaire rolling on the mats at the same time. And they're the best of friends. Mm. In any other spectrum, they would have never gotten along or even met. But this one type of culture has brought so many others together. Same thing with travel. Travel brings other people together. The internet has brought other people together, but it goes back to our original saying. It's only so much. You have to actually be there physically to understand it. Like the Karate Kid does in the movie. He's learning karate from a book, but then he doesn't understand when he gets his, behind kicked by guys who actually train in it, physically train in it. So you just have to experience it for yourself and then adapt it to your own life. So.
Absolutely. Mary Beth, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I think one of my ways of understanding culture is to observe, ask, and listen, meaning it didn't matter whether I was a new agent in the Secret Service or living in Spain or a different city in the United States or anywhere else. I'm an observer by nature. And when I don't understand something, I'm kind of like, well, so what's the purpose behind doing things this way? Or like when I was at bullfights in Spain, and I'd say, well, like, what's going on here? Like, I don't understand what's happening. So I observe something. I ask somebody that's a local or that's in it, and then I listen to what they're saying. Now, I don't necessarily take it just from one person. I might ask the same question to 3 people because, it's kind of like anything. Like one person has their perspective, but that way, like I'm with each individual, I'm sort of like making my knowledge of the culture or my awareness of the culture a little bit more complex, a little bit more deep. I'm kind of like, I can't even today. I've been to, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen bullfights in 3 different countries. And I still wouldn't necessarily be able to explain to somebody all the different nuances of a bullfight, right? I don't fully understand because it is considered cultural in the newspaper in Spain. It's under cultural art and culture. It's not under sport. So that was a really interesting sort of lesson for me when I'm really thinking about what we're all talking about now is all my different experiences. My family, thanks to my father, we all have the gift of gab. So like, we're very interested people. We like to talk with people. We like to ask questions. We like to listen. And I think for me, I can't speak for anybody else in the group or in the world, but that's kind of like one of my, I'd say like little magic, tricks of understanding culture a little bit more deeply.
I like that a lot. Shaun, got any thoughts?
Yeah, I do say it fairly often. Levels to the game. There's just levels to the game. And most people don't even know what level they're at. So let me use myself as an example to play off of what Justin was saying. And that is when I tied on a white belt, my first white belt in BJJ, I tied it on my 52nd birthday. And at that point, I'd already done 32 years of martial arts. And so I showed up on the mats and I thought, yeah, I know a thing or two. I've done this, I've done that. And got my arse whooped so hard. It was embarrassing. And you either get right with the program or you go home, you suck your thumb in the fetal position and never go back again. That ain't my style. And so I engaged in that process and presto changeo, here I am in BJJ. And so that story is kind of fundamental to everyone's life. We all get binary decision moments. I could have done that night, got my arse whooped, made my best effort and all of that good stuff, and then got home and said, screw that. That's a dumb martial art. I totally won there. Those guys lost. I won. And so you can spin the world any way you want in your head. But if you're pragmatic or if you're a realist or if you face the facts of the moment and look it square in the eyes and say, well, that sucked. How did that happen? I'm going to figure that out. And start applying some curiosity against the moment. Well, presto changeo, 8 years later, now I know a bit of BJJ. So that is life, man. How you run your life is how you then create your cultural life or your cultural understanding of life. And then, here's the critical part, you get to interact with other human beings through that cultural lens that you've been building year after year after year, the levels of your game. So now here's the fun part. Mary Beth has been talking about Haiti a little bit. I was there 2 years ago doing some work. And you know what? The only way I understand what she's talking about is I was there. I don't understand it academically. I understand it practically. So whatever she says about Haiti, at the moment that someone says Haiti, I feel the humidity, I smell the smell, I think the things that I think. And they're not based on a movie. Does anyone remember the smell from that movie in Haiti? Oh, that's right, you don't. Because you don't have any practical experience. Because you haven't stood on that ground. Because you don't understand the culture other than through a book. And so if I'm communicating with someone, I find it's a much richer conversation if we've both stood on the same dirt together. And that's why I think soldiers or someone who serves their country, maybe Secret Service. I've worked with the Secret Service when I was down there with Delta. If there's things that cause a group to share a common experience that is culturally rich, that group is so much richer for it. But the individual who carries on further into their life, like Mary Beth has, with all of her rich experiences, now she is a cultural, not icon, but she is a cultural interpreter for people who have never left Idaho. When she bumps into someone in a restaurant in Idaho and they start that conversation, and through Mary Beth's natural inclination for curiosity to learn more about the person in front of her, I'm sure the conversation would go to subject areas that the person in that restaurant had never heard before. Now it's Mary Beth's job to relay the magnificence of the world experience that she has formed over her lifetime in order to encourage that person in front of her to maybe just seek a little bit more, to maybe be a little more curious about the world outside of Idaho. So we live our lives, but our lives are also important to help other people live their better lives, simply by relaying what we've experienced culturally.
100%. Now we we are running a little short on time here, so I think what we're going to do is get some final thoughts, and we'll shut it down for the afternoon. Mary Beth and Justin, first off, thank you guys so much. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really do appreciate everything we've been brought forward. I can't wait to get you guys back on. Just at some point, you guys are coming back. Don't you
That'd
worry.
be awesome.
Yes.
Justin, let's get some
You
final
can find
thoughts.
me in the yellow pages, Chance.
Yeah, okay, just perfect. I'll go look it up.
When you're not
Excellent.
being beaten by it, Chance.
When I'm not
Yeah.
being beat up by it, yeah, 100%. So, Justin, let's get what are your final thoughts on anything we've gone over so far, and then we'll work our way down the table here.
Man, just get out and live life as best as possible. Whether it's, if you can't afford it, go out into your local city. I'm sure there's some culture that you've never experienced in your local neighborhood, your local city, your neighbors, whoever. If you can, travel. Travel, read, experience, taste, smell, do it all. Just get out there and enjoy it, and then share that with people. That's what I talk about in my book about mentoring. Take the things you've experienced and share it with others. And maybe that will jumpstart them into learning about culture and learning about life. And that's pretty much all I got. So it's been a pleasure.
All good. Mary Beth, final
Yeah, I
thoughts?
just think today's conversation has motivated me to be a little bit more cognizant of culture. And like, I think I told you guys I'm in Todos Santos, Mexico right now, and we had a hurricane over the weekend. And so after this conversation, I'm going out for margaritas and tacos with my husband. And I'm going to talk to the people about what their experience was being true locals of what I know what it's like being like a gringo in this town and whatever, as far as everyday life and experiencing the hurricane. But what's it like being a local and having your town beaten, like beaten by the rain and the winds, and being without electricity for a couple of days. Again, very different for everybody, but it's really motivated me to carry this through my day.
Excellent. I like it. I love motivating people. Shaun, final thought?
Yeah, just using the hurricane as the example. I mean, I've been through a few, and I wouldn't understand how difficult hurricanes can be for everyone around me if I hadn't have been in enough to see the outcomes and the sort of crippling effect it can have on some locals. But for me, as a person who's bouncing around the world doing whatever I was doing at the time, like, I'm there and then I'm gone. And so we kind of leave the lives that we're in the now behind us if we're not in that country as a permanent individual or someone who has a long-term connection with that part of the world. We kind of flit in and out, flit here, flit there. We learn this, we move there. We do that, we move there. And so our lives, in our modern lives nowadays, which is very different than 100 years ago, in our modern life right now, we can bounce all over the place, form temporary relationships, and then continue on and forget about the person that we just left behind, forget about the hurricane that we just left behind, forget about the problems that we just left behind of other people. That's really critical maybe for what we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the week. Cultural norms, cultural experiences, cultural scenarios, hurricanes, all of the things, the good and the bad and the ugly, all of the things that we experience in life, we then get to decide what we do with the past that we've just experienced a week ago, a month ago, 10 years ago. If we hang on to these important cultural lessons of, oh my goodness, 4 days after the hurricane, the local was ... If we can keep those kind of things in mind as we punch forward into the future, we'll become more empathetic to the people around us. We'll become more righteous in our direction. And so it's our job to calibrate our lives through the context of being sensitive to the cultural surroundings that are there every freaking second, even in your local town.
Bam. This is one of the hardest parts of my job on this show is just following Shaun on a regular basis. He just comes in here, drops the hammer, and then I gotta kind of figure out what to say after that. But no, I really do appreciate the conversation. I was thinking about a conversation I had many years ago with my stepdad, who was trying to explain to me what the culture was like in Afghanistan, and I was like, I've been there. I know what it's like. And he goes, well, I mean, I just read on this thing that, and I was like, great. Like, I've been there. I know what it's like. But even in that, I was only there for 8 months. I was in one region, in one specific area during a time of war.
Yeah.
That's my experience. That is the only view of that culture I have. And we had briefings ahead of time that were like, well, in Afghanistan in 1975, it looked like this. And in 1982, it looked like this. And in 1997, it looked like this. And now, and I'm like, great. Like, none of that means anything to me right now because I'm going into it today.
Yeah.
But the key of it was the fact that I had to learn about it. I had to learn about it every day. I had to learn how to interact with that culture on a daily basis and then build on it on a daily basis. And once I built on that understanding, it allowed me to grow my development of my own personal culture and how I interact with the world. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. See y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
See y'all later.
Thank you.